everyone, and welcome to Austin Startup Week. I know it's been happening for a while, and I am so excited to be here today. My name is Robert Wilson, and I am the Vice President of an extraordinary organization called Div Inc., which we're going to talk about all throughout the day, but we're also going to talk about a bunch of other things. But first, before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody over at Capital Factory and this lovely, wonderful event that you are putting on for Austin Startup Week. It's incredible, A+, first class organization all the way. And I know that we at Div Inc. really appreciate it, and me personally. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to talk about the social impact track. And we're going to have 6 sessions throughout the day. And obviously, we're going to be here where I'm going to be hosting for a good 3 of them. And we're just going to have a lot of fun. So I like to have a lot of energy. I know a lot of you are probably looking at me like, man, he's kind of excited. Yes, I'm extremely excited. Because when you're starting up a business, or if you are thinking about starting a business, the most important thing that cannot be replaced is energy. Energy is the most important thing, right? You have to be ready. You have to be excited. You have to get up every single morning and love what you do. And here at Div Inc. and also at Capital Factory and Austin Startup Week, it's incredible to come across so many people that have one goal and one shared philosophy, and that's helping people. There's nothing better than that. Being able to help others is incredible. So today we're going to talk about the social justice track. Like I said, at first we are going to have a panel. This panel will be led by someone that really needs no introduction, and we're going to get to him in a second. But before we do, we have an amazing panel that is going to be with you today. So let's talk about the other panel members, and let's make sure that we give them a warm introduction. So first, it's going to be Mimi Stiles from the company Measure. Also, we're going to have Homage Vasquez from Mission Capital. We're also going to have Beethoven Lopez from Design Run Group, and the president and the CEO, and somebody who really truly needs no introduction. I've had the pleasure of knowing this man probably for the last quarter now, and one thing that I can say just about him in general is his passion for wanting to make the world and the nation a better place, and that's definitely through the incredible organization that he started, that is Div Inc. Without further ado, I want to bring up our CEO, Mr. Preston L. James II. Preston, you here?
I am here.
All right. So, hey, we're right next to each other, guys, and he's wonderful. He's here, so let me slide out of your way so you can take care. All right.
Let's slide out of here.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Hey there, what's happening? All right, we're here together. Let me see if I can make sure I can hear everybody. Manage on me. I got you. Beto, how are you? Mimi,
hello.
How are you doing? And then let's see what we got here. Is it Erica? Okay. All right, we're good to go. All right, so excited to be here, be among friends. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. So let me go ahead and get started, right? What we're going to be talking about today is the equity imperative, driving social justice through innovation in the 21st century. And this is a super exciting topic because you guys, some of you who know me, some of you who don't know me, it's like, look, what do we need to do to affect change in the future in terms of addressing the inequities and disparities in our society? Enough of what we've been doing. We can't keep doing the same old of the past, and we need to look for a new way forward And so what I have with me today are, some extraordinary leaders who are just breaking down doors and just setting a new path forward. So um, super excited for that. And that's why they're on this panel, right? Because that's what they're doing. People need to know about it. People need to get engaged with it. And don't take my word for it. Listen to them as they talk about their initiatives. So let me start with Mimi very, very quickly. She's the president and founder of Measure. I personally call her the data queen. Uh, some people say Austin, I say Texas. So she's the queen of data. Um, and what they do is they solve the problem of equity through data access. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Measure. It's an award winning nonprofit and public education advocacy organization that empowers people to use data to tell their own story. And Mimi's got some new stuff coming out to take Measure to the next level. So we'll talk about that. And then also, I want to congratulate her because she's the recent winner at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, yes, MIT Solve program, which was basically identified as an anti-racist technology winner for her for Measure. So, congratulations, Mimi. Uh, that was some serious competition. I don't know, it was like 1,000 or so applicants or something crazy. So, congratulations. Next, my dear friend Madge, who is the Mission Capital CEO. And Mission Capital leads in the community. They solve the problem of community development and philanthropy and business consulting. And she does that through her leadership. She's doing that through an equity lens. And so we'll talk more about that. Madge has been tremendous, and she's got some new stuff coming as well, and we'll talk more about that. And then we also have Beethoven Lopez of the Design Group, and I've got an interesting story with Beethoven, but I don't want to take too much time away. But the Design Group is essentially a solving problems through human-centered design. And I know some of y'all might be scratching your head like, what's human-centered design? What are you talking about? So we'll get Beto to give us all of that. All right, so that is the panel. Let's see, okay, close to that. Okay, that is the panel, and we are going to get started with some questions. I'm going to try to keep my talking down so I don't have to talk, so we can hear them. Okay, so I'm going to start with the panel. Um, for some in the audience, they may not be clear, right, about when we talk about addressing racial inequity, and it's sort of misfocused, right? It's misfocused in terms of the efforts. There have been some good efforts, but they've been misfocused because they tend to address symptoms, not the core. And so, can you sort of clarify that sort of messaging in terms of, hey, we can do better by not, by getting to the core versus symptoms. So Beto, I see you shaking your head. You're like, yo, let's go.
Let's
Talk to
go.
me about what your perspective is on that. Like, what have we been doing in the past and what we need to be doing better in the future?
Hey, Preston, thanks for having me. And Madge and me, nice to see you on the forum, and everybody else who's here. Thanks for joining. Yeah, look, this is an important thing, and part of what I'm doing is addressing that in healthcare. And I know some of the folks here do it in other spaces, but for me, it's one that exists primarily in healthcare. And you can look back, almost 65 years ago to the quote Martin Luther King gave, which is, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. That was 1966, folks, and perhaps things haven't been any better than they are back then. It's still pretty dire in many respects. But specifically, look, I think what's conflated around racial inequity is that we sometimes aspire to simply representation, diverse representation, and that's needed, but it's entirely not sufficient. And we need inclusive offerings that really address the continuum of experiences that people who are underrepresented and marginalized often go through. And so what I've often found, I'm a person of color, I'm brown, and I'm the CEO of a company, that alone doesn't allow me to create inclusive offerings. We've got to find ways in which the breadth of experience from the people who are developing the offerings and the breadth of experience of the people we hope to serve can be folded into a process. And it just so happens that I look to a process called human-centered design, often confused with design thinking, but human-centered design are tools that allow us to gain empathy around that human experience on both sides of the equation, creating multidisciplinary teams that are diverse in nature. Their backgrounds of the people who not only have different degrees or disciplines, but have different upbringings, are brought together to address problems we're solving in the community that we need to uncover from people with very diverse experiences, not just your average person. If you talk to the average person, what you're going to get is a moderately healthy person. You won't get people who are challenged with either the social determinants or social drivers of health. You won't get people who have been discriminated against because of certain affiliations that they may have. And so those perspectives may never get it into the development process. And so for me, that is what's often confused, is that we just aspire to a simple representation model. Do you have people of color in your organization? And that almost in many ways has very little to do with, are you developing offerings which are inclusive of a diverse experience, a human experience out in the world?
Yeah.
I'll pause there because I can go on forever, as you know, Preston,
Yeah.
but I know that Madge and me probably have tons of other things to comment about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And that'll sort of lead me to sort of like the next question. You could probably integrate your answer into that first question if you want to. So, Mimi, that, getting to that human-centered design, right? Often what I find is that we're not operating from a strong baseline of information. Like, what's the baseline we should be working from? And we don't have that baseline because we don't have the data. And so here comes, Measure and, Queen of Data, Mimi Styles, who's sort of breaking things down and providing this perspective that folks never had before. And so Mimi, talk to us more about, getting access to that insight through data and the importance of it in the work that not only you're doing, but the work that we need to do in the community.
Thank you so much for that question. I think it's a great question, and I just wish that more people would ask it. And so first of all, at Measure, we provide free data and evaluation support to Black and Brown-led organizations. That's number one. So far, we've been able to provide a little over 2,800 hours of free data and evaluation support to organizations, especially here in Austin and also in California. And so, but the problem is, as you ask that question, which always kind of like takes me back and almost humbles me in the work, is the understanding that in all over the country, and in fact the world, it's kind of like we live in Black America, white America. We live in very different worlds. And in many cases, these different worlds that we live in, it's by design. This inequity that has been created has been by design. And that design is really institutional and structural racism. And so for me, as I think about data and as I think about the availability of data, the understanding of data, what's out there, what's not out there, I have to stop and center myself back in what am I fighting against, right? And like what I'm fighting against is actual institutional and structural racism. And then all of the things that come with that. And so that then results in what? Like the consequences of institutional racism then results in these big gaps, whether it's educational justice and the amount of Black girls sometimes 10 to 11 times more likely than white girls to be suspended in school, or maybe economic justice, where we see Black people, the unemployment rate being 16.8% during that last Great Recession, while the white population experiences 9%. Just insane data that in many cases also, though, those gaps are not even completely understood, because we know that there are so many people of color that are just not being counted, right?
Yeah.
And so we're still working to understand the incredible problem of the gaps that are out there when it comes to institutional racism and the intersection of the availability of data. And that's really where Measure is kind of, focusing our work in, is saying, okay, we don't know, we don't have all the answers, but what we do know is that, and what we're experts in, is our experience. And so how do we bring the qualitative data that we do know and pair that up with the quantitative data that we do know, and pair that up with the qualitative data, the lived experience data, the interpersonal phenomenological data, the information that draws from our experiences and who we are, how we show up in the community every single day, because that's credible and viable. And how do we bring that together to tell the story? And how do we ensure that our institutions that are set up to create, a better world for us, listen and use that information to make change?
Yeah. And that's, I kind of got chills as you were, just sort of talking about, and the chills came when I think about the power of that data and that insight and that information, combined with uncovering the experiences that Beethoven talked about. When we put that together, we can see the problem more clearly, and then go and address that at the core, which is what we're talking about, right? So Madge, I'm going to come to you. And just quick pause. Chelsea, good afternoon. Thank you for making it.
Excited to be here.
To have you. So Madge, when it comes to you, you're a community development leader. You've been a leader there for nonprofit leaders and also their organizations, really trying to help them build more scale, bring more depth into the community. Talk to us about, what problems you're seeing now, like where do folks need help, right? Where are the needs of those leaders? What do they need to go do what they need to do better and more effectively? And then what's Mission Capital's role in making that happen?
Thank you, Preston, and a delight to be with everyone around this virtual table, friends and community partners. Mission Capital is a 20-year-old nonprofit intermediary. We're a capacity builder. We provide leadership development and management consulting, strategic planning. And as we embark on our 20th year, I've been reflecting on our origin story. We were founded by what I call fondly call a group of godmothers who believed that nonprofits, very much like small businesses and large businesses, deserve to have the management supports to be successful. And what's interesting about the social sector, and I'll be kind of speaking to that because that's our world of nonprofits and philanthropy, is that if we think about the comments that Beto has just shared of design, the social sector, if we think about its legacy origins, was not designed for BIPOC leaders to really reclaim power and to give voice to that work. If we think about nonprofit work and philanthropy, it's really been built on this charity model where communities of color tend to be the beneficiaries, but they're not on the boards of major foundations. They're not executives of these nonprofits that are delivering the services. So when we talk about root causes versus symptoms, I want to riff off what Mimi just described, that systemic and institutional racism continues to be an incredible barrier that we have an opportunity to really overcome together. And it's not just BIPOC folks by design, it has to be all of us together and white allies. And so I'm really excited about the work that we're doing collectively at Mission Capital in partnership with folks like Measure and others and Div Inc. Because we are focused on closing the racial leadership gap among the nonprofit sector. So that's both at the board level and executive staff level and throughout. We are also focused on increasing organizational resilience and sustainability. And so very much like BIPOC-led small businesses are undercapitalized, nonprofits are we experience the same thing. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to share resources, tools, and again, to really challenge legacy systems that really don't serve any of us anymore. Our third goal is to expand collaborative networks, and that's kind of what we're doing today and what I've done in partnership with some of you. It's thinking about how, none of us can solve anything by ourselves, so how can we band together collectively, bringing our superpowers to advance racial equity and opportunity in Central Texas?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Madge, because we've known each other for a while, and one thing I know about Madge and Mission Capital is their exemplary leadership and collaboration. Right? How they identify awesome resources in the community and find ways to do things to help move the needle, whether it's being that leadership or the functions or just the networking component, which is really critical. Is what you said is that none of us can really do it all by ourselves. I mean, that's not going to be the way we need to move it in the future. So I'm gonna just go off track a little bit. How many, and then Chelsea, I'm going to come to you because I owe you an intro and all that good stuff. How many times when you talk about data, human centered design, how often do you go into a meeting and share some insights or some data, and the room you're talking to is stunned because they had no idea, right? Like, yes, a lot.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time, right? And it's like, and entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, we can solve most anything if we understand what the heck the problem is, right? And if people don't know, and just all of you just raise your hands and say, we go into the room, we share insights, and people are like stunned. They don't know. So there's a lot that folks don't know, right? And I think that's where the power of venture philanthropy and all those opportunities to begin leveraging the networks and subject matter expertise and the talent to really address these problems at the core, right? To really affect a new change, right? And so that's going to lead me to Chelsea. When she hears that word new and new generation, that's when Chelsea's like, yep, that's me, right? So let me very quickly introduce Chelsea Toller-Hoffman, who's the founding partner of Nova Impact. This is just one of the probably 2 or 3 things that Chelsea is deeply involved in. But Nova Impact helps leverage their network leverage various forms of capital and connect to collaborative investment and philanthropic opportunities, aligning purpose and profits. And Chelsea has a particular focus on sort of like the next generation of philanthropists, the next generation of purpose-driven philanthropists coming from the next generation. So without further ado, let me bring Chelsea to the table. So Chelsea, tell me tell us, share with us. We've talked about human-centered design, leveraging data to really try to move the collaboration. What's missing from what you're seeing in your world? Why you created Nova Impact? How do we get, how do we do the social entrepreneurship, social justice innovation in the 21st century and be inclusive, the need to be inclusive of this next generation of philanthropists?
Yeah, so I think
You got to do this without making me feel old. So come on with it.
I think it's really easy to say, yeah, we want collaboration and we want to invest in people of color and we want to invest in women. It's an entirely different thing to actually move the needle on that, right? So I think part of one of the concerns is assuming something that's logical should just happen. It's very logical, right? And yet years and years and years have been spent, and we still see, I don't want to quote the exact percentage, but somewhere around 1% of the capital is going in that direction, right? Which, to your point about when I walk into rooms and say, did you know? A lot of times it's shocking, right? Even though we should all theoretically know this information. So part of what I'm really passionate about is giving next gen the mentors that they need, the spaces that they need, the education that they need. There's a great group we work with called Left Tackle Capital, and it's a fund of funds, but their entire investment is in really training women and people of color on venture and fund management. And I just think that's a really tangible example of how we move the needle. But in terms of collaboration, my main point is we have to stop operating out of fear and start operating out of hope. So we need to come not from a scarcity place, but from a place of cherishing one another, supporting one another, moving this needle together. And when we do that, we're going to change the world.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I love that approach. I love the insight of I mean, we have that same mission, right? This burning need to really move the needle. I personally, I have 4 children, and I tell my team, I'll be damned if my 4 children are dealing with the same exact stuff 50 years from now. I'll be damned, right? And so we are at this really, I think, really critical moment where we can actually sort of like step up and demonstrate how to do things differently, not just for the sake of doing it differently, but as you say, move the needle with some new approaches. All right, so I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. Bento, I'm coming back to you, and then we can all sort of kind of chime in. We know that the act of research can, basically bring some bias into the data. And I know maybe you have some insight on this too. How do we remove the bias in this research? And these researchers are coming in with some real credible stuff, right? But there's some bias in there. How do we remove that? How do we get past that so we can really see what's under the covers there?
That's a great question. And I'll start by kind of articulating something that has been important to me in this journey, which is that I'm kind of a systems designer, a systems thinker, though my background is in product and service design. So I've always kind of realized a world that's very interconnected. And something that I knew going into this space was that the business of healthcare has very little to do with the science of medicine, at least for me in the stuff that we do. And what's important about that is that we not only needed to create at Design Run Group an ecosystem approach, which is we created a venture studio which builds new companies, we created a fund, and we created a nonprofit, all of which have to synergistically work with one another because they don't actually serve one of the bigger challenges that we have, which is getting innovation to people in vulnerable communities. Because of that dichotomy, and there's false dichotomies everywhere. And so one of the false dichotomies you point out, Preston, is that for us, the opposite of vulnerability is not affluency. The opposite of vulnerable is being resilient. And when you start to unpack how research begins to unveil the kinds of false dichotomies that we hold true without even knowing that that's how we describe and create frameworks around, then what we're left to do is make sure that two things happen. And I described this really early on, which is that in the human-centered design process, it's rooted around understanding the needs of people you hope to serve, and never to pivot away from that just because there's a better market somewhere else and I could take my product and get more money somewhere else. You start and end with the needs of the people that you hope to serve. But around that, you wrap a multidisciplinary team who has various experiences, diverse experiences. And on the other side, you gotta go search for people with diverse experiences, not just the average person. And that is a really hard challenge, but also a bit of a black art. There's no real, in many ways, there's no real regiments or recipes to ensure that you've created a very diverse set of customer stakeholder interviews. What you need to do is understand the conditions and the constraints around the problem you're solving and say, is this person that you're interviewing, does that person have a story to tell that's going to be different at the fringes, perhaps, of what everybody else experiences? What you do when you get enough people that represent that breadth of what one might find in a marketplace or in that industry that the product is serving, is that you start to find patterns. And pattern finding is the single best way in which we can limit bias. Because if you can create patterns between people with very diverse experiences, which point to root needs that they're each expressing in their own way, that pattern finding helps you eliminate the inherent bias that you might think your process or your teams have. Yeah. Now, it's not the only thing you do, and I know that you can, in Mimi's work, do many things to avail insights that help you even uncover biases that you might not even see in those ways. Right. Institutional biases, which are systemic to the ways in which different flows, cash, knowledge, all that stuff happen. Those are meta. I'm just talking about needs, right? And so for me, a really important part about research is not to ever seek research as a way to that's going to, asking people to tell you the answer. That's not what human-centered design does. That's not what anyone should aspire to do. It's you should aspire to understand what are their frictions, what are their pain points, not just to have them in many ways express to you what answer that they would love to have that they don't have today.
Yeah. And so I love that approach. And I think that's something, back to what you were saying is, as leaders, as even people who want to be engaged, be asking those questions, right? About, what are the actual needs? What are the experiences? What's happening? As opposed to just, look at some paper and say, oh, yeah, I understand the problem, right? It's like, helping them go a lot deeper in terms of getting the perspective they need for that. So Mimi, I know, you see a lot of research and information. What's your perspective on the buyer's research? How do we get rid of some of that bias in the research information?
Yeah, I think the first step is just to recognize that you have biases, that it's a human thing to have biases. That acceptance of realizing the bias that one holds in our bodies, and understanding that bias has been put there for, generations and generations. It's something that has been developed in us, right? And I think it's once we have accepted and acknowledged the biases, then we can start to challenge our biases through the work that you see that's happening on this panel, right? It's being able to trust ourselves enough to know that we don't have it all together, and that we have, grown up in this system that has really harmed people. And so there's this thing, I don't know, I'm feeling like there's humility, right, that needs to be elevated in research. At Measure, we say very clearly that we want to disrupt traditional research that has essentially betrayed many people, that has labeled our pain and created a legitimate reasoning for, even in the times of enslavement, for a slave to run away, to want to run away. There was a label. It was called drapetomania, right? It was a sickness. And so we have to understand that we have grown up, that we have been birthed into a system that has developed these very intentional biases that we have with us right now. And it's really up to us to challenge ourselves to do whatever we can to eliminate them. I'm not saying that it actually can be eliminated, but I am saying that the more we acknowledge that, the more we can do to trust other people, to bring people in. I don't know how many times I sit inside of a room with a bunch of really incredible academic researchers, and when I begin to talk, I'm still looked at as less credible, as less valid, as less, welcome into that space, because I didn't go a certain route. Whereas they, and so that's the stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the stuff that has been talked about for many years, right? Like, this is nothing new. Like, the work that we're doing is nothing new, but it's really it's accepting. What we saw with George Floyd was a mass realization of empathy. And I think that empathy helps to create a space, an environment where we can begin to really challenge our biases.
Absolutely. So I'm standing up, I'm raising my hand, I'm stepping up to the challenge. And I know so many of you out there are like, how do I step into this challenge, right? How do I step into this new realm, breaking the glass, knocking doors down, removing barriers, because it's a different mindset. It's a uphill battle, right, to sort of change these mindsets and these methodologies that have been in place for decades, right? And that's what these, awesome leaders here are doing. So I want to be mindful of time. And what I want to do is I want to kind of go around to each of you and give you an opportunity to talk about, there's a question that came up from the audience. What steps are you taking specifically towards building equity in Texas? Is there a way for us all to contribute deeper with one another, put our heads together, and accomplish even more? And the answer is hell yes. Yes, there's all of us are like, absolutely. And where is the biggest opportunity for growth in collaboration? So I would love you, Madge, I'm going to start with you, then Chelsea, and then we'll go to talk about maybe a key initiative that you have going right now where people can plug in and build greater equity in Texas and go deeper. And then we'll sort of go around and hopefully get everybody in to talk about some key initiative they have going on. So, Madge, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Preston. Yeah, this is a great question when we think about the state of Texas. And for us at Mission Capital, one of the seminal data reports we collaborated on a couple years ago was with a group called the Building Movement Project out of New York. And they do a series of studies on the racial leadership gap in the social sector. And so we partnered with them to get a sense of what does ours look like in Central Texas. And the data had patterns, as Beto shared, and it showed that like much of the country, our Central Texas social sector is led by less than 20% leaders of color, though our nonprofit sector, 6,000 plus nonprofit strong, mostly serve communities of color. So I really believe that is an opportunity. That data set was inclusive, it had focus groups, it had survey data, and it allowed us to kind of get a snapshot of how can we activate this data in a way that is meaningful. And so we have since then designed, and I've got my co-designer here, Mimi Stiles, CEO ED BIPOC-led coaching circle. And Mimi and I are really facilitators. We've been holding this very sacred and brave space for peer BIPOC CEOs and EDs, and we adapt with each cohort. We're now in our is it the third cohort? Second cohort. We're going to have a third later on this fall. But what we're learning together is that we need space as BIPOC leaders to just claim our own identities, to heal and process through our own traumas that we've absorbed, as Mimi shared, through generations. And then, to Chelsea's point, to adopt an abundance mindset and think about how do we claim this power and really leverage it for community good. So going back to the state of Texas, we are a hot mess, y'all. Like, now is the moment. This is the moment to seize. When we think about voter suppression in Texas, we think about the siege on women's health and women and civil rights. We look at the just horrible treatment of immigrants and migrants in our state. And we're still trying to figure out how, what are the impacts of this triple pandemic that's COVID-19, that's economic instability, and still national racial reckoning and racial reckoning in Texas, despite the demographics. So I feel like we've got our work cut out for us in Texas, and am eager to be part of the solution along with many collaborators.
Awesome. So Madge, if you could, how does somebody sign up for that? Or, if you could put that in there.
Yeah.
Because I know that's something, even as a leader at DivInc, it's, it can get lonely out there, and you need that safe space just to sort of, just be. So definitely appreciate that. Chelsea, talk to us about what's going on at Nova. I mean, you've got some really powerful stuff going on to really galvanize some folks in the community. Lead us through that.
Yeah, so one thing I would say that is a bit different about Nova or our strategy, and even thinking about this question of Texas, right, is we really embrace local but global. So Austin is mine and my business partner's home. This is where we grew up. We love our city. We love our state. But we've really seen, different parts of the world take on new strategies. It's been wonderful to have our community members have people to connect with at venture funds or family offices or those at the UN that are really looking at how do we tackle some of these UN Sustainable Development Goals around diversity and inclusion and around women. So my slight nudge would be to consider how do we leverage partnerships beyond Texas and bring back what we need to make change here home. So that's one thought. And the second thought I would say about things that are going on as an example is we are formulating a wonderful partnership with Feely, which is run out of Austin and New York, and have partnered with Soho House, which recently opened in Austin, to do some really cool things for Next Gens, and Next Gen's passionate about giving back for International Women's Day and women founders. So we're going to do that in partnership, and are really excited to have that in Austin. So that's an example, right? A tangible example of we had these connections in other areas, other cities, and we said, how do we bring that to Texas? How do we bring that change to Central Texas? How do we give that opportunity to our folks here to move the needle? So that's one example, but we're up to a lot of things. We're really excited to be partnering with UN. I mentioned Left Tackle Capital. They're out of San Antonio. A lot of various funds and Next Gens really trying to think about this next step of moving. When we say capital, we embrace all forms of capital. So your time, your talent, your treasure, what boards you're sitting on, who you're giving to, where you're working, and we're just really excited to do that in the future.
Awesome. So look, I mean, y'all have to go find Chelsea. You love the energy, love the mission. She's moving and shaking. I'm just, she's going to help change this landscape. So let's all jump in and support Chelsea and Nova. Beto, I'm coming to you. Design Runner Group is just at the Venture Studio going. Tell us, how folks can get involved. What can they do? Because this is a game changer as well in terms of how we move forward.
So I'll reiterate, like we are a venture studio, which means we build companies, and we build companies to address the gap that exists in getting promising new health solutions to vulnerable communities. And that's not altruistic. If we can solve for those needs, that means that those ideas, those innovations can scale so much more quickly to the rest of us.
Yeah.
And so my invitation is that we are constantly on the lookout for entrepreneurs and residents, people who actually want to get into the business of creating something that doesn't exist, with the support of a venture studio, which is the support of services and different either processes or talent that's required to stand up a studio, a business around the studio model. So whether that's funding, whether that's talent, whether that's you have an idea but don't really understand where and how that could potentially grow. What we're interested in is passionate people who want to, who identify with the need to actually start with communities who are underserved and have been underrepresented in the ways in which we get them solutions, and know that that is an incredible vehicle to start scaling to the rest of us who could also benefit from better healthcare, right? And again, this is just in healthcare, but I would say there are venture studios cropping up in all different verticals. And if you have an itch in education, if you have an itch in another space, seek those out, because looking for an entrepreneur in residence is a key ingredient to creating the change that you want to see as well. And also be a catalyst for provoking a system who doesn't like to change.
Yeah. The innovation mindset, the human-centered design approach, it's, like I said, it's a game changer. And I've been sitting here thinking, like, okay, how I'm going to partner with Mission Capital and Nova, and so I'm all good. I got my plan. So, but of course,
so I'll put my email there, Preston, and if someone wants to reach out because they're interested in being an entrepreneur in residence, reach out.
Absolutely. All right, Mimi. Okay, so Mimi's got, I'm not stealing any thunder, but Mimi's got this awesome initiative that's going to allow her to take Measure to the next level and really change the game here. So maybe you want to talk to us about Nexus Impact? I know you do, so come on with it.
I am a Black girl in tech. Yes, I want to talk to you about Nexus Impact. So last year we partnered with some amazing organizations called the Black Leaders Collective here in Austin, and we found that 79% of Black-led organizations did not have what they needed to share their impact, to collect their metrics, to share their metrics, to download a dashboard, to articulate the progress that they've made. And so we, at the same time, MIT was launching their anti-racist technology in the US challenge. Altogether, for all the challenges, there was over 1,800 solutions. Nexus was one solution. And what Nexus is, it's a cloud native platform, social media platform where BIPOC-led organizations can discover data, they can share analysis, they can gain funding, they can upload their metrics, download a dashboard, quickly get that over to a funder. It's really about how do we shore up the support that Black and Brown-led organizations need in order to thrive. They are equipped to do the work better than anyone else because they're impacting their own communities. And so how do we do justice through technology? How do we give them the tools that they need in order to be great? And so that's really what Nexus is. I think of LinkedIn meets Match.com. And so it's really creating unity through technology. We are bringing people together, organizations that are Black and Brown led through technology, and also providing a place where the funding community, the philanthropic community can find these organizations and these collaboratives and fund them. Awesome.
Awesome. And you heard it from the queen of data, y'all. That's what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about, right? But hey, I know we probably have 1 or 2 minutes. So first, I'm going to throw a piece from us as well. You guys know I run the bank. We were inspired last year to do something we hadn't done before, and to address like how do we do innovation differently in the social justice, economic justice space. And so last year we launched a social justice innovation accelerator, and it was really awesome experience that just got us started. Two of our participants actually competed in the MIT Solve competition that Mimi was a winner in. But they also won, in I think in their categories as well. And so we're looking to do the Social Justice Innovation Accelerator again. It's a 12-week program for startup founders, social enterprise focused founders, and the applications are open. I put my little link up in there too, so we got that going on. And I can tell you, in all honesty, that each one of these folks on this panel are breaking barriers, right? They're creating change. So if you're out there, you're purpose driven, you're looking to plug in, you're looking to make a difference, please reach out to any of these awesome leaders in the panel, and then also to Didink as well. I know I'm personally going to be working with each of these four folks on here in some way, shape, or form. And it is only through this collaboration, this strategic collaboration, that we can really take it to the next level, create the changes, the real core changes we need to see in our communities. And yes, it's going to come in different forms, right? It's going to come from, sort of the data side and design side, the community leadership side, the venture philanthropists, engaging with United. It's going to come from all of that. So thank you all for being here today, sharing these amazing insights. I wish we had just a little bit more time, but if you want to talk to us more, we'll be around at the Social Track Happy Hour this evening at Ani's Day and Night from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. So come check us out there. We'll be there, hanging out, sipping, drinking, whatever, talking, and we'll see you then. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for the great panelists. Have an awesome rest of the Austin Startup Week. Thank you.